Ever feel like you're pushing a massive boulder up a mountain every Monday morning, only to watch it roll back down every Friday night? Congrats. You're not having a breakdown. You're living a Greek myth. The gods aren't laughing at you personally. They're laughing at all of us. Welcome to the modern Sisyphean existence we call building a career. I promise you'll see yourself somewhere in the next few minutes, and maybe find a bizarre kind of freedom by the end. You know the myth. Sisyphus pissed off the gods and got the ultimate punishment, eternally pushing a boulder up a mountain, watching it roll back down and starting again. Forever. No breaks, no benefits, no promotion path. Just endless, meaningless labor. Sound familiar? It should. Camus called Sisyphus the absurd hero, not because he succeeded, but because he persisted despite knowing the absolute futility of his task. In his 1942 essay, Camus argued that Sisyphus's awareness of his own absurd condition is what gives him strength. One must imagine Sisyphus happy, he famously concluded. With all due respect to Camus, he never had to deal with LinkedIn. Let's get brutally honest about the modern work landscape. You spend your 20s accumulating debt for degrees that might be obsolete before you finish paying them off. Your 30s chasing promotions that add responsibilities without proportional compensation. Your 40s realizing the corner office comes with golden handcuffs. And your 50s praying automation doesn't render you obsolete before your retirement account hits 6 figures. The boulder gets heavier. The mountain gets steeper. And unlike Sisyphus, you don't even get job security. But here's where it gets interesting. Camus didn't see Sisyphus as a tragic figure. He saw him as rebellious. The moment Sisyphus acknowledges the absurdity of his situation is the moment he transcends it. His fate belongs to him when he owns it. The real tragedy isn't pushing the boulder. It's pushing it while believing someday it won't roll back down. This job market sells the same delusion. Work harder. Network more. Take that coding boot camp, get that certification, optimize your resume. Hustle on weekends. Sleep when you're dead. Eventually, the boulder will stay put. Eventually, you'll reach the summit where the real successful people hang out drinking rosé and talking about their investment portfolios. Spoiler alert, there is no summit, just different-sized boulders and steeper mountains. Let's talk about what happens physiologically during this endless grind. Chronic stress floods your system with cortisol. Your amygdala, the brain's fear center, enlarges while your hippocampus, responsible for memory and learning, literally shrinks. Your telomeres, which protect your chromosomes, deteriorate faster, accelerating aging at the cellular level. The gods have nothing on corporate capitalism when it comes to torture, and yet somehow, we've normalized this. We glorify the hustle. We celebrate burnout as a badge of honor. We've turned self-destruction into a virtue, calling it work ethic and dedication. Camus would call this the height of absurdity. Consider the modern job search. You spend hours tailoring applications to pass through algorithmic gatekeepers. You rehearse answers to inane interview questions. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? In therapy, Karen. Definitely in therapy. You negotiate salaries based on market rates that somehow never account for housing costs in any city where the jobs actually exist. And after all that, nearly half of Americans are still living paycheck to paycheck. The boulder keeps rolling down. What makes our condition particularly absurd is that we're more productive than ever. Since 1979, productivity has grown 6 times faster than wages. We're pushing those boulders more efficiently, but they've gotten exponentially heavier. Sisyphus at least had consistent expectations. His boulder didn't expand every fiscal quarter. The most insidious part? We've internalized the mythology that our suffering is noble, that someday our boulder pushing will be rewarded. Meanwhile, the 3 richest Americans own more wealth than the bottom 50% combined. Different mountains, different boulders. Now let's talk about the gig economy, Sisyphus 2.0. Not only are you pushing the boulder, but you're also responsible for bringing your own mountain, setting your own hours, all of them, and competing with thousands of other boulder pushers willing to do it for less. Oh, and you're not an employee. You're an independent contractor. So when your back gives out from all that pushing, That's on you, too. This isn't just exhausting, it's existentially absurd. But here's where Camus offers something revolutionary. In acknowledging the absurdity, in staring directly at the futility of our condition, we find a strange kind of freedom. If nothing ultimately matters in a cosmic sense, then everything matters in a personal sense. If the game is rigged, why play by the rules? What would work look like if we embraced the absurd? If we stopped pretending our boulder pushing had some grand purpose beyond survival and occasional joy? Maybe we'd demand more than work-life balance, that sad corporate consolation prize that suggests life happens outside work hours. Maybe we'd laugh at passion as a job requirement when the real passion is fair compensation. Maybe we'd recognize that a system demanding endless growth on a finite planet is the ultimate absurdist drama. Here's a radical thought. What if we just stopped pushing for a minute? What if we all took a collective breath and looked around at our fellow? Sisyphus is laboring up the same ridiculous mountain. Camus argued that rebellion against the absurd, not submission to it, is what gives life meaning. Sisyphus's moment of consciousness at the bottom of the mountain, before he begins pushing again, is his moment of freedom. He sees the futility. And he pushes anyway, but now on his terms, with full awareness. That's not resignation. That's rebellion. We can't escape the labor. We all need to eat, to shelter, to live. But we can escape the mythology that our labor defines our worth, that our productivity equals our value, that our salary reflects our contribution. The true absurdity isn't that we must work. It's that we've created a system where work consumes life rather than sustains it. So where does this leave us, the modern Sisyphuses, with our laptops and commutes and performance reviews? Maybe it starts with small rebellions, setting boundaries, refusing to check emails at 10 p.m., talking openly about salaries, supporting labor movements, questioning growth for growth's sake, valuing leisure not as recovery time for more work, but as life itself. Maybe it means recognizing the absurdity of spending our healthiest years doing things we hate to afford, a retirement we might not reach. Maybe it means finding meaning not in the boulder or the mountain, but in the pushing itself, in the craft, the connection, the momentary satisfactions that occur despite the larger futility. Or maybe it means something more radical, reimagining work entirely, building systems where labor serves life instead of consuming it, where productivity gains translate to less work rather than more profit, where value isn't extracted but exchanged. Camus would say that in the face of the absurd, we have three options: suicide, which he rejected, a leap of faith, believing in some higher purpose without evidence, or acceptance of the absurd coupled with revolt against its conditions. The first is tragic, the second is self-deception. Only the third offers dignity. So the next time your boulder rolls back down, when the promotion goes to someone else, when the startup fails, when the layoffs come, when the algorithm changes, remember you're not alone on that mountain. Remember that the absurdity of the situation doesn't reflect on your worth. And maybe, just maybe, as you walk back down to start again, there's a moment of clarity, a moment where you see the cosmic joke for what it is and laugh anyway. A moment where, despite everything, you're briefly, defiantly free. One must imagine the modern worker happy, not because of the boulder, but despite it. This isn't hopelessness, it's honesty. And honesty is where real change begins. The gods condemned Sisyphus to an eternity of meaningless labor, but they couldn't condemn him to an eternity of believing in it. That choice was his alone, just as it's ours.